Welcome everyone to Mail Plus TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 16. It's called The Forsaken. So, full spoilers for the episode as always, and as promised, Lwaxana Troi is on the station, along with some other ambassadors who are here. There's a Vulcan, there's an alien-looking dude. I never quite caught where he was from, but
there's a few of them there.
Yeah, there's a few, and they're bickering. Poor Bashir's been given the shit job of babysitting them, which I did think, right, this is all fine and well, Cisco, that you've put this shit job on him because you don't want to deal with them, which I do actually really appreciate, and I'll more on that in a bit. But if there is a medical emergency, Bashir actually is quite an important member of staff to have in his position.
He is, but also Bashir's personality radiates bitch who you give the shit jobs to.
Until he grows up a bit.
But he has that energy to him right now.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the ambassadors says that, you gave us this, I can't remember what the phrasing was, but it was he's like a first rung officer. He's the rookie. Obviously he's not a rookie in Starfleet, he's not an ensign or anything, but as far as the officers go, he's like the lowest on the totem pole of the people who are important. And one of them mentions that as if it's that's an affront. How dare they give us the run to the officers. So
it's just because this is how it's done. You know, he's done his time doing it.
Honestly, one of my favorite little moments of the whole episode is when the ambassadors have barged their way onto the bridge, or I should say operations because that's what they call it here, but you know what I mean if I say bridge. And there's a moment where Cisco realizes it's about to happen, that they're about to talk to him, and he just sort of takes a moment to sort of brace himself and put on his face, because he does not look happy beforehand. And I appreciate it. And it's not that we've never seen Picard feel the stress of having to entertain important people, because we've definitely felt, especially with Mama Troi running around. Of course.
Yeah, I remember multiple dinner table scenes.
But this felt a little bit different to me. This felt like Cisco is always going to hate this. That he's never going to enjoy playing the guest, the
host.
The host. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. I don't think he's ever going to enjoy that. And it felt I got that from this moment. I was like, this is different than Picard, because if Picard's got an important guest from another culture, he will see it as an important job. It's a part of his thing that he has to go and keep that peace with them, sort of be a proper delegate. But Cisco, you could tell, is this is not what I want my job description to be.
He can't wait to give it on to someone else so he can get out of it.
And equally at the end of the scene, when he finally gets rid of them, there's just a sigh and a moment of, okay, all right, back to important business at hand.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that. But yeah, so there's a lot going on. Obviously, the two big things of this episode, and they do intersect quite well, I think, as far as A plots and B plots go. These do marry quite well. Obviously, you've got the ambassadors there, which is effectively just the reason and a bit of extra, people to have in peril. But it's the reason for Troi to be there, and the main plot that comes from that is her with Odo. So that's kind of like a comedy subplot that has some interesting, more dramatic beats towards the end that we'll talk about. And then the other plot, the crisis plot, if you will, which affects all the other plots, is that there is something in the computer system. I won't say virus, they were very specific to point out it was not a virus, but some kind of, basically a life form that exists in computer systems that came from this derelict little ship or probe or whatever it is that's came out the wormhole and is affecting things. But the way they describe it, the way O'Brien kind of notices it, because O'Brien's fighting with the computer early on, he's saying, hey, I want to completely gut all this and change it all, because all this Cardassian crap's just getting in the way of me doing my job. And Cisco's not thrilled about it, but he's like, no, hey, if you need to get it done, you need to get it done. Get on with it. But then the computer starts being very nice and doing what it's been asked of it, all that stuff. But then it starts playing up, and almost like it's, as he puts it later, trying to just get attention, but oh wait, O'Brien's not paying attention to me, I'm going to create a problem over here. And that happens throughout the episode.
Yeah, I think as opposed to virus, it's more parasite. But in terms of its antics and the way it acts, it's a bit It's very poltergeist-esque.
Yeah, although the way they describe it and ultimately decide to treat it is that it's like a puppy who wants attention. It's not actually malicious. It's not actually something that is out to cause harm. You just have to realize how to treat it so that it's not causing damage in the same way that you would stop a puppy from wrecking the furniture. You know, as he puts it later on, we'll make a doghouse, which is a subroutine where it can happily live, feel like it's getting the attention that it wants, but never have to deal with anything else. I do wonder if this is ever going to come up again. If this thing's going to evolve in the computer system over time and maybe actually be like a help later on. I don't know. I'm curious.
I'd be surprised if it did, but also it could.
It could, yeah. It may
It's not impossible,
but
yeah.
It's an interesting concept certainly to throw at us. I mean, a lot of that plot is O'Brien, complaining about the computer to either Cisco or Dax, and just kind of, going on about different things. There's a Bajoran there who's like a red shirt who's like just kind of saying things occasionally to him. That's basically most of what that plot is, other than just this probe things came through the wormhole. We're going to try and scan it, and it leads to all these other things. It's a perfectly fine subplot. Obviously, the main mechanic of it is that it creates the situations that the other characters in the episode go through, and most importantly, traps Odo and Mama Troy together in an elevator for an extended period of time, which
multiple hours, and she's already been hitting on him, and he's in very Picard vein uncomfortable with that.
Well, she gets a crush on him because a pickpocket in Quark's place steals her brooch, and Odo very quickly and efficiently does his job and finds it. And
I appreciate the way he kind of defended Quark a little bit as well, because Quark's like, hey, there's a sign, not my problem.
He's like, yeah, that's shitty, but like, he can steal from you, like, officially in here with the gambling and stuff. He doesn't have to just pickpocket. So
yeah, it's not his style.
Yeah, I like that too. But this gets her sort of like, oh, you're one of a kind. Oh, I'm going to attach myself to you. And it is actually quite entertaining seeing Odo get kind of scared, like when she just goes to like the security room and tries to kiss him, and he's like backing off in fear and makes an excuse to run away, and he goes to Cisco. He's like, there's a problem, Commander. He's like, what is it? It's like, Lashmana Troy, I think she's interested in me. And Cisco just starts smiling like, what's wrong with that?
You have fun with that.
He's like, but I don't know how to deal with this affection. This is not me. And it does lead to some interesting stuff, though, once they do end up trapped together. It's funny watching him try to dodge her. It's especially funny there's a moment early on in the trapped in the elevator where she keeps talking about whatever it is. She just keeps going on. And it's a certain point, he's been told by Dax over the comms that he can't like shapeshift out of there in water form. He can't T-1000 his way out because there's this voltage running around the turbo lift that'll like zap him if he tries to. And there's a moment when she keeps talking to him and he's just sort of staring off into the distance, and she's like, oh, what are you looking at? And he goes, I was just wondering how many volts were in that spark. That broke me. That was a good line.
I think it was that, and for me the moment where she's still like, making the moves on him, and he pulls out, basically goes, I don't eat, I don't shit, leave me alone. It is essentially what it boiled down to. And it really made me laugh. Oh,
because she keeps trying to have a picnic with him, yeah. And he's like, I don't eat. This mouth isn't even a real mouth. I just make it look like a mouth so that you all feel comfortable. So I can fit in. That's all it is. And she's like, is that your real hair? Because she's mentioned a few times. In fact, we see her walking around with different wigs on all episode. And he's like, well, it's real in the sense that it is like my part of my body. Yes, it's my matter, but
no, it's not hair. It's just the same goop as the rest of me.
Yeah. But would you believe it? This actually ends with a couple of interesting, sweet moments, and even Odo talking about something I don't think we've heard before. When he's talking about being raised, and she's asking if he's always been lonely and stuff like that. He ends up referring to, he copied the hair. It's actually right after the hair conversation that he said that he copied the hair from the man who, he didn't say look after him, that wasn't the phrasing he used, but it's a scientist, right? He basically talks like he was in a lab, right? He was in a research place, and his quote unquote guardian or father, if you want to call him that, was a scientist. And I don't think we've heard him talk about like this upbringing as if he was treated as an experiment before. This feels like kind of a new bit of Odo lore to kind of sink our teeth into.
It definitely is. I like it in the sense that obviously it makes sense that okay, they discovered it and they're like, what the hell's this? Let's investigate. But I also like that by the end of it, he was clearly they'd run the test and they're like, hey, no, he's all right, he's cool. They'd come to the conclusion, they gave him an official position on the station. It's obviously, it sounds really sketchy at first, just like, hey, they prodded him in a lab, or it is the way it sounds at first. But I think the fact that he based his look after the guy means that they probably didn't treat him that badly. And also, obviously, we know where he ended up, so they must have, come to respect him at some point along that investigation.
Well, it's like, I don't get the impression it felt like he was tortured or anything like that, but it does also feel, it still feels very cold though, and I do wonder, like, when it comes to Odo and how, like, sort of much of a solo person he is, and how much he doesn't, look for affection or comfort in others, and he's very, everything he bounces off with Troy this episode is all very much like, no, I don't look for affection, I don't think about mating rituals, I don't think about this stuff. Like, how much of that is his, like, because he's his species, a changeling, and how much of that is just because he built up such a thick skin because he had such a lonely, cold upbringing where he was effectively just someone who was in a lab who was being tested on until they said, you know what, we can make use of you because your abilities make you very, practical as this type of role, and put him in that position. It's the sort of thing where maybe it wasn't outright villainous, but it's also not like they went out of their way to give him like a loving family home life either. And
oh, absolutely not. And I think he makes a point of saying he didn't raise me, because I think she mentioned, it's the man who raised you. And he's like, no, definitely not that.
Yeah. And it all leads to basically he starts to, it's like he's sweating effectively, but it's like, no, he's coming up on the 16 hours. He has to turn back into liquid. And he's never done that in front of another person before, outside of maybe the scientist in the lab. And so he asks her to turn around. He's facing the other way. And she actually makes this little gesture where she takes off her wig and shows her real. I actually thought she was going to be like bald or something. It turns out she's just got like regular hair that she's.
It looks normal, which for her is. I mean, she makes a point of it, like that's horrific almost.
Yeah, but it's this nice little gesture to say, hey, you don't have to feel, embarrassed in front of me. To the point where she actually holds out her dress and, lets him melt into that, and she holds him like a big puddle in her dress, and the turbo lift, and by the time obviously everything's fixed, he's recharged a bit and he's able to get up, and they have their little goodbye moment, and it's all very sweet. I think the comedy works because we know Troy, but we also know Odo, and I think the best thing they could have done with this, which I think they did, is they used the way she is invasive with people to reveal a little bit more about who Odo is to us. And that's, as far as like the what they set out to do and what they achieved, like I think they nailed that part of it.
Pretty much a perfect use of guest stars in that sense.
Yeah. It's one of those things where immediately you're like, oh, this is cute. They're using, Luxwana Troy, but no, there's a purpose to it, and it's like you could have written a new character who had a similar personality, but you've got one in the barrel that you can already use. You've got one who's already established that'll mean something to us. We can sort of, and we almost get something fun out of anticipating who she's going to latch onto because we know what she's like.
It is, and I think it makes it more effective because there's a shorthand already in that they don't have to establish her. They assume that the vast majority of the audience already is familiar with her, and they run with that. So they can get straight into it from the start. They don't have to spend a couple of scenes introducing her and setting up her personality. It just assumes we know that. Yeah,
and I think that's largely true and fair to be, because Next Gen I think had a bigger audience than Deep Space Nine.
Yeah,
did.
there's almost certainly a very, very small percentage of people who watch this without having watched Next Gen. It's impossible for it almost for there to be no one that's occurred to.
Relatively minor.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. I think that side of things was really solid. The other side of this is the other ambassadors. They get trapped in a hallway. They get set on fire because of the chaos going on, and Bashir has to jump in to kind of like take charge mode effectively, and we don't even really see that much. If we see the initial sort of blast and him just kind of like gathering them all, and then we see kind of the tension on the outside as Cisco's like, oh, we have to cut into this hallway and get them out, because they do point out that obviously the station normally has fire suppression systems that would just quickly deal with this, but obviously the computer's on the fritz and it's doing all these random things, and the fire suppression is not coming on, so it's like, oh no, we have to actually get in there and take them out. And so we see them worry a little bit, but ultimately we kind of skip to the end of it where they're coming out, and the other ambassadors are all praising Bashir. They're all saying, oh, he did a great job. They're all calling him Julian. They're all on first name basis now. They're like, hey, we're going to recommend you for commendation. You kept a cool head and you saved us all. You kept us all alive, and they're all very impressed. So, and I think this works to me because these other ambassadors were always just a backdrop to set up why Mama Troy was there. And it's a fun little sort of, effectively the C plot, for lack of a better.
They're essentially the borderline throwaway gags.
Yeah.
Because like I say, we barely see any of this plot. They're just kind of there. We know it's happening. We get almost just like it's there for funny reactions with Bashir, and yeah, we hear about how they're so annoyed at him, being stuck with him. We see him complain about it, and then by the end they're like, oh no, he's great. He saved us all.
In fact,
I think it's almost funnier not seeing it all.
The alien woman gets very offended when he suggests that they use the hollow suites at Quark's, because she's immediately like, oh, that filth! You guys did... And he's like, no, it's used for... You can do many things in the hollow suites. It's not all dirty. And then the other guy's just like, no, that's exactly what you meant. I'm in. Like, give me it. I'll take a turn. Her kind are too frigid. They don't like all this shit. But I'm in. So, it's... I think as far as episodes go, it's probably the best one I've had in a few, because it's done some good character building for Odo. O'Brien's got a few fun bits, as does Cisco, as does a good number of the characters. I mean, there's not as much Quark in this episode, and I do like a lot of Quark in my episodes, but we got to spread the focus around a bit.
It was nice still.
Yeah, I know. And I think this further like exploration of like, because there's one thing I was noticing, especially in this one, because we're talking about the computers a lot, is like how different the control panels look in the computer screens versus next gen. But it makes sense that they all look different because this is all Cardassian tech. This is all
on Bajoran. It's not Starfleet. Is the point.
Yeah, and that, in fact, that's exactly what O'Brien's whinging about for a lot of the episode, is that it's not working the way it should. And the standards they had were different to him. He's going on about pressure levels at the start, and the computer's like, "Oh, it's
it's all fine,
20%. That's well within the acceptable range." And he's like, "No, it is not. we keep the 40% where I'm from." So I think those little differences, because they're in a place that they didn't build and it's not native to them. I think I like those little details when they sprinkle them in throughout the show.
I do as well. They are nice. Also, this episode got me thinking about stuff that for the future of the show. The 16-hour time crunch for Odo. I can't wait to see how that's used in some later seasons.
Yeah, this is the first time it's been like we're coming up on that limit.
Before it's just been kind of it's a thing that he does. Now it's like no, this is a necessity. And it made that clear that it will happen one way or another.
I do have to question one little detail of it though. Is that he starts getting really kind of sweaty, like he's a junkie, right? And sort of like really acting badly. And he says that he's at hour 15. And I'm like, wait, are you like this at hour 15 every day when you're on your... Because it feels like you shouldn't get this bad if you're doing your regular rest cycles. Is it because is it just because he's scared because he knows he can't? So he's...
It could be, yeah. Or maybe he is. Maybe he actually... Like he says, he's in hour 15, not at hour 15. So it could be like 15 and a half hours. And it could be like, when you get tired, you start yawning, and that's your body saying, go to sleep. He starts sweating. He's like, okay, right, it's time. And he goes before it gets to this.
It's also a very comparable amount of time, because like you say, it's very similar to a human sleep schedule.
16/8, yeah. It is pretty...
Not that we all get that perfectly every day, of course, but that's the intent.
Speak for yourself. every single night, without fail.
I know you too well to know that is complete and utter bullshit.
Yeah, it is. It's an absolute lie. The point is, what I was going to say is, with this, I can't wait to things like, maybe Odo's behind enemy lines. He's a little bit trapped, and we know there's a 16-hour time crunch that he's got to get his mission to get in and out.
Yeah. They could use that as a mechanic down the line. I do like that sort of stuff.
I think because we always think, oh, it's really easy for him to sneak into places, right? He just shapeshifts into something. They carry him in. We've already seen that in multiple episodes.
Oh, that's the other bit of the conversation that I really liked, actually, was him talking about how when he was, like, you know, not necessarily in college, but in training, in that part of his life, he kind of, like, was this party trick, sort of. He talked about how everyone would be like, hey, turn into a chair, turn into this, turn to that. He basically became the entertainment for the people around him because he was different and he could do this thing. You know, and Luxwana has a nice little moment where she's like, hey, you can come to one of my parties and they'll all be there to entertain you, which is a sweet retort to what he said. But again, it paints this very lonely lifestyle where he was always treated as different, even if he wasn't actively being, you know, hated or put in, you know, whatever. Like, it still sounds like a very lonely existence where he was always reminded of how different he was. And I don't think we see too much of that on Deep Space Nine. Like, on the station, it feels like everyone respects him. And maybe the reason why he is such a hard ass is because he's, like, always vying to make sure he is respected because he spent so much of his life just being the party trick who can turn into a chair.
Yeah, that could be it. And now this is the only way he knows to make sure that's not, you know, the way he's seen that way.
Yeah. Not that that's going to make me change my outro line where I joke about Odo turn into something, because I'm in too deep now.
Yeah, you committed to it.
Yeah. Actually, that's
whether it's offensive to him or not.
Actually, that was one of the things she said when he said, "Oh no, my mouth's just water, like, or liquid, like everything else." She's like, "I can swim," and I'm like, "That's sort of weird." First of all, he's not that much liquid. Secondly, what sort of weird sex games we get into when the water itself is the other partner?
I don't want to know what Troy gets up to.
She sounds gun ho to try. She's like, "Oh, you know what?"
She is definitely down to try anything once, let's be honest.
She seems that way. Definitely seems that way. It is interesting having her here with no mention of Deanna in any way, shape, or form. You know, it's not a concern. Obviously, she's there for her own reasons.
She's completely here as a character in her own right, as opposed to being a lot of the times on Next Gen. It's this secondhand embarrassment that we that we have to watch.
Which, don't get me wrong, I think after a couple of episodes, even though Deanna was still there to react to her antics, it never really felt like she was there for Deanna's plot half the time. Sometimes it was just for the Picard interaction or whatever else. So, I mean, she already kind of gained that, but this like lets her just be that entirely, because there is no connection to another character. So
yeah, and it proves she's a strong enough recurring guest now to kind of be on that level, with, in her own right, and just come in an episode on another show and still be exactly who she is.
I get that he was busy, but they missed an opportunity to have like O'Brien walking down like the promenade, seeing Luxwana Troy in the distance and doing a 180. Well, like Grandpa Simpson with a hat, just like realizing she's here, because he's the only one here who we know's met her before. I mean, I don't know if they ever had a scene together, but presumably when she was around, he would have bumped into her.
I think, I'm sure he had a transporter scene though, right?
The joke would have worked either way, I think.
It definitely would have, yeah. So I've decided she is this era of Star Trek. She is this era of Star Trek of Harry Mudd, and the recurring character, with that is into like an actual guest recurring character, as opposed to someone like O'Brien, who was a recurring character and got a bigger role, like an actual guest who has that larger than life personality, who all the cast will see and be like, oh god, not them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, not that everyone has a parallel from Next Gen to original series, but I think that one does make some sense to me. Yeah,
and I say this era as opposed to one Chuck, so she's now on both shows.
Yeah, and obviously O'Brien's a full main character now. He's he got promoted. Congratulations, O'Brien.
Yeah, he earned that paycheck.
Well, that's the interesting thing when you go back to Next Gen, though, is you can sort of see them testing the waters with him. Like, he got that big episode in season 5, I think it was, with his old commander.
Yes.
And that felt like it was, oh hey, he can be a main character. We don't have room for him to be a main character regularly on this show, but I imagine in season 5 they were already developing and thinking about what Deep Space Nine was going to be. So It's interesting to track that through that. I mean, you can see them kind of like testing things. So I wouldn't call it a backdoor pilot per se, but they're definitely testing the character a little bit.
Yeah, I'm
like
sure if there was a horrible audience response, I suspect he would not have made the leap.
And the same, obviously, with all the Bajoran setup, all that stuff. But yeah, Forsaken, good episode. You know, not an all-timer by any means, but a solid character-building episode with some fun bits sprinkled throughout. I definitely enjoyed it more than the, all the fantasy characters come to life from last episode.
Oh yeah, okay, I get that feeling. This was entertaining, and like I say, it was enjoyable to watch, especially with Troy's always enjoyable to watch. She's large personality, but using it to further characters as well as just being fun made it a good episode as opposed to just a fun one. There's a difference.
And it was the first time we ever saw Odo be vulnerable, I think, in some way.
Yeah.
Well, emotionally anyway. Maybe he's been in danger before, but this is the first time.
It's not the same. Yeah.
Yeah, this was the first time it felt like he was opening up a little bit. So, yeah. All right. So next time on Deep Space Nine, we'll be looking at an episode called Dramatis Personae. I'm probably butchering.
Dramatis Personae.
That was close.
It's what you get at the start of a book or a play that has the list of all the characters.
Oh, very good. So here's the description on IMDb. The entire station's command staff save Odo, become power-hungry, and vie to defeat each other by forming secret alliances and plotting assassinations.
Oh, I'm so in.
Odo tries to figure out the cause of this mysterious behavior. This does sound good. This just reminded me of that season 1 episode of The Office where they're trying to form an alliance, but it's more deadly in this case.
Yeah, this sounds amazing. We're just saying not every character has a parallel. This is very much Odo as Data stand-in, like in terms of the way the episodes are structured.
Yeah, like he's very much the Data of this show, but of course, like we compare Sisko to Picard, we compare Odo to Data. Data is this very innocent, like, I want to learn to be human. Odo's like, I'm going to judge all of you until you're proven innocent.
I can't wait to watch his reactions to all of this. Him trying to just enforce normality, is going to be great.
Yeah, look at that. Odo getting a couple of episodes potentially that are great back to back. That could be interesting. Next time though, we'll be back to Next Generation, and then after that, we'll be doing 2 Deep Space Nine in a row because that was the original air date order. But we'll be back to Next Gen next time, and then we'll get to this episode on Deep Space Nine. So. Let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. You can like and subscribe. All that stuff helps us out a lot. And of course, you can support all the content and get the Star Trek reviews a little bit early over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And do that over there. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek. And somewhere out there, Odo's just making another lady's dress soaking wet.